It's finally time to talk about the probably most anticipated movie amongst most audiences, Nosferatu. Now, this also had the effect that I'm now calling the long legs effect, and the substance also kind of suffered from this as well, where the hype is just so massive that people end up getting their expectations so high that when they do eventually watch it, they end up disappointed. Now, personally, long legs and the substance both deserved all of the hype that it received, and in my opinion, Nosferatu also deserved a lot of the hype. Is it a perfect movie like what I think Long Legs and the Substance is? No, I did not give Nosferatu 5 stars like I did those other two movies. But it also doesn't deserve a lot of the negativity and like negative reviews that it's getting and commentary that I'm seeing about it. But some people just are not a fan of Robert Eggers' remake of Nosferatu, which is a remake of the 1922 movie Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror. Now, this is Robert Eggers' fourth film that he has made. He, of course, did The Witch, he did The Lighthouse, and The Northman all before this. But let's talk about Nosferatu and my thoughts about Nosferatu, because that's why you're here. In the 1830s, estate agent Thomas Hutter travels to Transylvania for a fateful meeting with Count Orlok, a prospective client. In his absence, Hutter's new bride Ellen is left under the care of her friends, Friedrich and Anna. Plagued by horrific visions and an increasing sense of dread, Ellen soon encounters an evil force that's far beyond her control. Nosferatu, I think, is seen as a little bit more controversial because it is like a true gothic horror movie, and it's about women's sexual repression and shame around sexuality. So this theme, of course, is not going to resonate for everybody. Anyway, that's all to say, a movie that is this anticipated is going to have a lot of passionate and heated responses, which is very interesting to me to see. So where do I fall? Let's get into like my formal opinions about Nosferatu. So Robert Eggers, I think, is a master at creating and crafting a period piece. He always does era-accurate dialogue and costuming, so I feel like the experience is really immersive and it's a very authentic experience. And I think that is honestly one of the best elements of Nosferatu. For me, it's a 10 out of 10 on costuming and aesthetics. I think aesthetically, this is his best movie. Now, this might make me sound dumb, but I actually appreciated, I've seen mixed opinions about this, but that doesn't matter. I appreciated that they kept the plot really simple. I mean, it is a remake of a story that already exists, so how much credit I can really give to Eggers, or, you know, I don't really know. But I feel like they stuck with pretty minimal characters that were really straightforward and easy to understand. They did a lot with the characterization of the characters, and we just like understood who they are and like what they represented in this story. And so therefore it was like easy to follow, if that makes sense. Like I feel like the story just pans out pretty traditionally, and I liked that about it, because when you get into a period piece like this that's more on the artistic side, sometimes it can be a little bit more complicated, or like in The Witch, it's harder to understand the language that they're speaking. So therefore you might miss a couple things in the first viewing, you know, from the story. So this, I feel like, didn't suffer from that. Speaking of characters, I feel like the performances were obviously 10 out of 10 as well. Like, I have no criticisms when it comes to the performances themselves. I feel like the casting was absolutely perfect. I feel like Lily Rose Depp really shone in this role, and I'm glad she had this opportunity to like lay out who she is as an actor and like her range, because I feel like maybe she didn't have opportunities in the past that really got to highlight that and like showcase her talent. And like, yes, it's nepotism, but to follow it up with a performance like she did as Ellen in Nosferatu, I'm okay with it. Now, she did all that movement and everything with her face with no CG. I feel like that's pretty believable. She did work with a movement coach in preparation for this role, and that's very apparent. And honestly, I feel like her performance was more unsettling and more effective horror-wise than Count Orlok was, which kind of goes into a criticism, but I will reserve that for later because I do have criticisms of this movie. And I think that was kind of the point, to make her possession and obsession around Count Orlok, or rather his obsession with her, to make that the focus of the horror and like how he controls her. I think that is where the horror elements come. And so the way that she like is possessed by this is really effective and really scary versus Count Orlok just as a monster. Let's talk about Count Orlok, shall we? Bill Skarsgård in this role is amazing. I feel like he's such a chameleon. He's really proven himself to be a chameleon actor. I love when an actor can play so many different roles and they're not just typecasted as like one or two things. Now, how he looked in the movie, there's a lot of talk around it. They had very minimal appearances from Count Orlok in any of the marketing, and I think that was to create kind of a reveal with kind of what Longlegs did. Longlegs did it a lot better, in my opinion. I feel like they didn't need to necessarily reserve Count Orlok for a big reveal in the movie, because to me, it left something to be desired. Like, I didn't love the way he looked. And I won't spoil it for anyone, but I feel like it wasn't weird enough, you know? He was a little gross looking, but beyond that, it was like, he's kind of just a dude. I don't know. Now, the voice that he did for Count Orlok was also not edited at all. There was no pitching or, you know, any sound editing at all. He worked on his voice for 6 weeks prior to shooting this movie, and he would constantly record and practice this voice. And I think that's really a testament to his passion for this kind of role, which he did say he would never play another character as evil as Count Orlok, which I think is a little bit unfortunate because I think he works great as a villain. Like, he is fantastic in these kind of roles. Obviously, his dedication is there, and overall just talent. Like, he's very impressive as an actor. Now, is Count Orlok more evil than Pennywise? I don't think so, personally. But you can sound off in the comments, I guess, of who would win in a fight, Count Orlok or Pennywise. Because I think Pennywise is a little bit more evil, like, if you think about it. Like, maybe not, the movie doesn't have the same tone, but... And the fact we almost got Harry Styles. Like I said, the casting was perfect, and I'm glad scheduling issues ruled out Harry Styles. And Anya Taylor-Joy was supposed to play Ellen, and I think that would have been fine. Like, I would have been happy with that, and obviously we would never have known about Lily Rose Depp's role and like her portrayal of it, but I'm glad we got her in the end. So we're gonna get into the criticisms. I did like this movie a lot. I overall rate it 4 stars, so I do have criticisms though, so let's talk about it. Nothing too extreme, obviously. I feel like maybe they're considered a little bit nitpicky, and also no spoilers, remember, so I'm not gonna spoil anything. So the biggest thing that I kind of agree with that I see being talked about a lot, it's slow. It's a slow movie, and do you know what? That's gonna be fine for most people who this is for. It was fine for me, but it is on the slower side. It's a slower paced movie. I hate putting that as a criticism because it's not bad. It's not like a bad thing necessarily, but I do feel like the script and maybe the storytelling could have been cleaned up a little bit to reduce some of that slower pace, because when you go too slow, it reduces a little bit of that tension, and it would have been good to like bring the pace up a little bit or add a few more horror elements. And I know that is, I hate saying that too about a horror movie. It's like, it wasn't scary enough, it didn't have enough horror in it, because of course I'm gonna be ripped apart because people are gonna again say you didn't get it, you don't understand the horror. And I understand that a lot of the horror is subtext, like I said, the obsession and possessiveness almost of Nosferatu, of Count Orlok, of Ellen is the horror. So I get it, but I wanted more. Like, he could have been scarier looking, you know? I just feel like it could have pushed it so much farther with the horror elements, and maybe Robert Eggers isn't that kind of person, because looking at his other movies, he doesn't necessarily really push it to the limits, and it's a lot more subtle in the way that he does horror, and it's a lot more in the storytelling and the characters themselves than, like, you know, a lot of visuals or, you know. The only time in Nosferatu, there were like 2 times I remember being like really unsettled while watching this, not necessarily scared, but I don't really expect to be in a movie like this, but I was unsettled like twice, and it was because of Ellen and her like reaction to things. It was never with Count Orlok. I didn't feel a lot of tension when we were with Count Orlok, you know what I mean? The beginning gave me chills. Like, that opener was so horrifying and so amazing, and it really set the tone for the entire movie, but then I feel like we never got to that level again. It never pushed it to that point again where it was horrifying and disturbing to look at. It just slowed way down. There's like one other scene that's similar, and those are the two scenes that like made me feel a little uneasy, you know, that I was hoping for to witness in this movie. But it is story driven, it's somewhat character driven, and I wish they kept that horror and that terror that you feel in that opening scene. And maybe because it's a little bit of ambiguity and it's like there's like a mystery around Count Orlok, and I never felt that again. I never really it never pushed it to that level again for me. The ending was the weakest part for me. Okay, I'm not gonna go into exactly why because I don't want to spoil it or anything. I'm not gonna do spoilers. I just don't feel like I need to really like get into it. But they kind of tell you. It just ends up being predictable, you know what I mean? And I found the ending to be beautiful. Don't get me wrong, it was a very beautiful ending. That last shot is so haunting and gorgeous, honestly, and a very intriguing and like disturbing horror image. But I found it to be anticlimactic at the same time. I wanted a little bit more of the element of surprise with the ending, and like I was anticipating something else was going to happen to get in the way. Like, I get the concept and the execution and what they were going for with that ending shot specifically, but I still feel like they could have executed it while still making it a little bit more exciting as a horror movie. You know what I mean? It doesn't need to be like breakneck pacing with twists and turns along the way. Like, we don't necessarily need that. But I just felt like it needed a little bit more quicker pacing, or, you know, the pacing was just overall a little bit slow, and the story and the horror elements were just a little bit lacking. Like, we just need a little bit more. Just inject a little bit more, and it would have really hit the mark for me. Visually, though, one of the most beautiful movies to look at. Like, it is probably one of the most aesthetically pleasing gothic horror movies I've ever seen. The coloring in this, just the grays and the drabby colors, the costuming was so stunning. Everything was beautiful. And then Count Orlok's there. He's, yeah, you know. It is an interesting juxtaposition, you know, to have such a weird monster creature thing and then have everything else be absolutely beautiful, like down to the actors themselves are just beautiful to look at. So definitely interesting movie experience. I liked it overall. I gave it 4 stars. It's very stunning, and I really enjoyed the story overall. But as usual, I would love to hear your thoughts on Nosferatu. I know people are going to be very passionate just from what I've seen around and online. People are going to have very passionate opinions about this movie, I think, because of the hype that was built around it. But just recognize when you're the audience for something and when you are not, because there's always a movie for us, you know? We don't necessarily have to like every single movie that comes out. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry it's up so late, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.